Outdoor adventure activities are exciting sports, but there are also some dangers too. In this presentation, I will show you how we can control the dangers. The first activity our students are going to be doing is bouldering. Here is my risk assessment for bouldering. It shows some of the risks involved and what we can do to control the risks. Bouldering involves climbing rocks which are close to the ground without using harnesses or ropes. The personal protective equipment for bouldering is shoes with grip, slim-fitting but flexible clothing, a chalk bag, and a safety mat. Shoes with a good grip are important because they prevent the climber from slipping off the wall and create friction to help you climb. The shoes need to be light, small, and flexible so you can get your foot into nooks and crannies. A chalk bag containing chalk is also essential for bouldering because it helps the climber's hands grip onto each hold by keeping your hands dry and not slippery. Slim-fitting clothing is also important because loose-fitting clothing might get caught on the rock and cause a hazard. It needs to be stretchy clothing so that you can move easily. Finally, crash mats are essential to cushion your fall from the boulder and prevent injury. If a crisis occurs during bouldering, then the first thing you do as an instructor is to assess the situation and perform first aid. The instructor should use Dr. ABC to help them. D is for danger, R is for response, A is for airway, B is for breathing, and C is for circulation. All of these things need to be checked to see how injured the person is. If the injury is serious and the instructor has access to a mobile phone, then they must call 999. Before the instructor alerts the mountain rescue, they need to know their exact location so they can be rescued easily. If you cannot use your mobile phone to get help, then at least one person needs to go on foot to find it, but one person must stay with the casualty. If you have no reception on your mobile phone, then you can use emergency signals. Either blow a whistle 6 times or flash a flashlight 6 times every minute until help arrives. When bouldering, it's important not to damage the environment. Some of the environmental considerations you should be aware of include: be careful you do not trample on plants when approaching the boulder. You could damage important native species, some of which might be endangered. To prevent this from happening, the instructor should make sure that all the climbers understand why they should keep to the path when approaching a boulder. Do not remove natural vegetation such as mosses and lichen from the boulders without permission from the landowner or the conservation body. Removing vegetation from rocks might affect species who depend on them to survive. The instructor needs to make the climbers aware of this before they start climbing. Avoid damaging the rock itself. If many climbers use a rock regularly, then over time it will erode, which could affect food chains. The instructor needs to educate the students so they become responsible climbers. Do not chip the rock or deface it. If everyone damaged the boulders, then it would gradually wear away. Do not disturb nesting birds or wildlife. If birds are disturbed, then they might move to another area and might not be as successful or be able to breed. Signs that birds are being disturbed include alarm calling, agitated birds, and dive bombing. Mountain biking is a potentially dangerous sport, but injury can be avoided by a careful risk assessment. The instructor needs to make sure that each cyclist goes down the runs which are appropriate for their ability and experience. The instructor should explain the potential risks and teach skills to avoid injury. The personal protective equipment for mountain biking is a crash helmet, mountain bike, clip-in shoes, gloves, and knee pads. A crash helmet is very important in mountain biking because it will protect your head if you come off going at speed on a downhill trail or if you hit your head on a low branch. Without a helmet, you could be seriously injured, even killed. If you are doing a high-risk jumps, then you need a full face mask to protect your face if you come off. An essential piece of equipment for mountain biking is the mountain bike itself. It has a good suspension, shock absorbers, thick wheels with more grip, and lower handlebars than a road bike. These characteristics make it easier to travel down a hill fast on rough ground. You would not be safe doing this on a normal bike. Clip-in shoes are really useful when descending down a trail. They prevent your feet from coming off the pedals when you go over bumpy terrain, which means that you are in control and less likely to fall. If you crash though, it's difficult to clip out, so you could get more hurt. Gloves are important because if you come off the bike when travelling at speed, then if you put your hands down, they won't get cut. Also, they prevent you from getting blisters while holding the handlebars, and they protect your hands from the weather. Knee pads protect your knees if you fall off. If a crisis occurs, the first thing you should do as an instructor is to assess the situation and perform first aid. The instructor should use Dr. ABC to help them. D is for danger, R is for response, A is for airway, B is for breathing, and C is for circulation. If there's an accident, then the instructor should use Dr. ABC. They also need to prevent further accidents from happening by getting assistance from the next rider. This rider should be asked to walk back up the trail and warn approaching riders to slow down or stop. The instructor should call for help to the base contact as well as emergency services. All organised mountain bike centres have a base emergency number in case of an accident. People at the base can help guide the emergency services to a place of the accident because they have a good knowledge of the routes. It is thought that mountain biking leads to soil erosion of the paths. This increases stormwater runoff, destroys wildlife habitats and plants. To protect the environment as you bike, follow the IMBA's rules of the trail. Ride only on open trails, leave no trace, control your bike, yield to others, never scare animals, plan ahead. If there's a muddy puddle on the trail, you should fill it with a crisscross of sticks because this stops corrosion of the soil. If mountain bikers are cutting a corner, they could be damaging wildlife, so you should block this corner with stones or branches. Here is a risk assessment for canoeing. Some of the risks include drowning, getting separated from the group, and hurting your back from lifting the canoe. The main personal protective equipment used for canoeing are your paddles, because they help you to move the canoe, steer it, and stop it. Your buoyancy aid will also help you to stay afloat, and it's not too bulky so you can swim with it on. Your wetsuit will keep you warm when you fall in the water. It's better to wear one with no arms so that your arms can move freely. You can also wear a thin outer layer of waterproof Kags jackets and trousers to keep you dry. You can wear a helmet in case the canoe turns over in shallow water and you hit your head on a stone. You need waterproof shoes to keep your feet protected if you need to stand on stony ground. You need waterproof gloves to stop your hands from getting blisters from rubbing on the paddles and to give you better grip because when your hands get wet they would be slippery. If there's an emergency, then the instructor should use Dr. ABC. If there is no phone signal, the instructor should send 2 able canoe students back to the base to get help. The instructor should clear the water by asking the students to stand on the riverbank or return to the base if it is close enough. The instructor will need to fill in a HXCC accident form, which will be in the first aid kit. It will be given to the safety officer. Students should not drop any rubbish into the waters. They should stay away from the riverbirds and be careful not to disturb wildlife habitats on the riverbank. Students should be careful not to damage bankside vegetation when launching. If students were to see an animal in distress, they could phone the RSPCA. Here is a windsurfing risk assessment. Some of the risks include collisions, drowning, and hypothermia. The personal protective clothing for windsurfers are a wetsuit that keeps them warm and dry, water shoes, which gives them good grips on the board and protects their feet from getting cut by sharp objects underfoot, a buoyancy aid or windsurfer harness, which keeps them afloat when they fall in. The windsurf emergency procedures are to provide emergency first aid, then you call for help from the water centre staff who will be watching for anybody in difficulty. The photo shows the SOS hand signal to call for help. Tell the other students to clear the water. The water centre will send out the rescue boat to bring the casualty to land. The centre staff will call the ambulance, and finally an accident report must be made by filing in the form and giving it to a safety officer. Windsurfing that takes place in lagoons or in the sea has little environmental impact. Seabirds can easily move away as there's plenty of space in the sea. If windsurfing on a lake takes place on a lake, then participants should steer clear of wildlife and only enter and leave the water at the jetty to avoid trampling vegetation and disturbing wildlife habitats.